Hi everyone, Bob here, and this is another installment of Criterion Critique, a segment where I pick a Criterion at random from my personal library and I review it for your pleasure. You're welcome. Today's Criterion is Spine number 97, Spike Lee's 1989 film, Do the Right Thing. Released in 1989, Do the Right Thing was Spike Lee's third film, the first being She's Gotta Have It and the other being School Days, and it is widely regarded as his finest film. He has gone on to make a number of other very great films, such as Malcolm X and 25th Hour, but make no mistake, it's Do the Right Thing that's widely regarded as his magnum opus. A little bit of a disclaimer before I continue, I am going to be spoiling the ending of this film in this video. I don't feel like I can really talk about this film at length without talking about its highly controversial ending, but I really don't see much of a problem with that. I mean, this film came out almost 30 years ago. If you're watching this video, odds are you've already seen it, so you already know how it ends. It's a very iconic ending to a film. And but if you haven't seen it, then I urge you to go ahead, pause this video, put it in your watch later playlist or whatever, and go watch Do the Right Thing. It's one of the greatest American films of all time. Seriously, go watch it. But yeah, just a little bit of a disclaimer before I continue. There will be spoilers. And go! Set in the Bed-Stuy neighborhood of Brooklyn, New York, Do the Right Thing follows the lives of the various people who live in the neighborhood during the course of one day, the hottest day of the year, as they go about their various daily routines while racial tension bubbles underneath the surface. Do the Right Thing sports an enormous cast of characters, which includes Mookie, played by Spike Lee, the director himself, a pizza delivery guy and underachieving father who works for Sal, played by Danny Aiello, an older Italian-American gentleman who runs his pizzeria in the overwhelmingly black neighborhood of Bed-Stuy, with his two sons, Pito and Vito, played by John Turturro and Richard Edson. Despite being brothers, Pino and Vito have two highly conflicted feelings about working in the Bed-Stuy community. Pino is outwardly racist. He does not like working around black folks. He does not like having to serve pizza to them, and he's often very vocal about his feelings. Vito, on the other hand, seems to have absolutely no problems with it, and he often kind of passively brushes off his brother's hostile attitudes. There's the mayor, played by Ossie Davis, an elderly alcoholic who often dispenses with his aged wisdom to a group of youngsters who are not at all interested in hearing him. There's Mother Sister, played by Ruby Dee, who is Ossie Davis's real-life wife, in a matter of fact, who keeps a watchful eye over the community from the safety of her windowsill. And that's just scratching the surface. There's Buggin' Out, there's Mookie's outspoken friend, there's Radio Raheem, another one of Mookie's friends whose god-tier ghetto blaster does most of the talking for him. There's Tina, played by Rosie Perez, in what was her first major role in a film, who is Mookie's girlfriend and mother to his son. Jade, played by Joey Lee, Spike Lee's real-life sister, who is also Mookie's sister in the film. Oh, and there's Mr. Senior Love Daddy, played by Samuel L. Jackson, years before he did Pulp Fiction and blew up and became a huge movie star in his own right, who plays the local radio DJ. Do the Right Thing is really big on telling its story through its visuals, and there's a lot of little Spike Lee-isms that you'll see in the film that you'll also notice reappear in other of Spike Lee's works. One of the most noticeable visual motifs, I guess you could say, of Do the Right Thing is the use of color. The whole film is just completely saturated with warm colors, lots of reds, lots of oranges, lots of yellows, and it's there to emphasize the heat. It is hot in Bed-Stuy, and there's pretty much no escaping it. Very rarely will you see cool colors in this film. There's one scene that I really liked where Tina is arguing with her mother in her apartment, and the scene begins in a room with some very cool colors. I think it was some blues, And but as the argument between them begins to escalate, and things get and the characters get angrier. And let me tell you, Rosie Perez, she does anger very, very well. But as the argument begins to escalate, they move into the next room, which is just full of these oranges. It kind of underscores the rising tensions in this sort of heated argument that Tina is having with her mother. There's, of course, also the large red wall that the three old guys are seen hanging out with in a number of scenes. They just sort of sit around and talk and chat and just trade jokes while trying to beat the heat. Another cinematic effect that Spike Lee employs in this film, and he employs it in a lot of his other films, is the use of Dutch angles. On a number of scenes, especially scenes where things are becoming really tense and confrontational, Spike Lee will sort of tilt the camera to the side and shoot things at an angle. It almost sort of looks like the world is tilted and sort of becoming askew, and it seems like the more tense things get, the far more tilted the world gets. This becomes especially prominent during the climactic scenes between Buggin' Out and Sal when they're having their confrontations, and the Dutch angles are really, really intense. Racial tension is a common theme in the film, and it keeps coming up in various moments. One of the first moments that really come to mind is the scene where the three old men who are sitting by the red wall are having a conversation about the Korean grocery store that's right across the street from them. One of them is angry and frustrated with the fact that there's so many non-black businesses in a predominantly black community, and he's wondering why. He's wondering if maybe it's something with the Koreans, that they know something that they don't, or maybe it's just something about black folks who just can't quite get ahead. It's a really uncomfortable conversation, even though he's talking about something that's extremely important. And it gets a little intense, but the moment is quickly diffused by Sweet Dick Willie, played by the unfortunately late Robin Harris. I think he passed away only about a year or two after this film was complete, who just completely shuts the other two old fellas down by telling them, hey, he's going to go over there right now and buy himself a beer. He's going to give those Korean people more of his money. It's Miller time, motherfucker, he says as he shoots up from his seat and goes right across the street for a beer. That's one of my favorite moments in the film. In a second scene, a group of young kids in the street are trying to beat the heat, and they do this by opening up a fire hydrant and basically turning the block into like a little water park. There's this really great moment where everyone's kind of gathering around the hydrant and they're playing in the water and just goofing off and having fun. It feels very real and natural. Like, you know, it didn't feel staged at all. It felt like a genuine, honest scene from real life. It's pretty great. Things get a little intense, however, when an older Italian gentleman in his really nice car is about to drive through the street, and he pleads with the kids not to spray him or his nice car. And they said, oh yeah, sure, we're not going to do that, but come on, you and I know better. And he drives past, and what do? They take the can and they spray him in the car. Well, he gets mad, the police get involved, and it's a really confrontational scene where he kind of expresses his frustrations in dealing with black kids. The language doesn't get too dreadfully racist, but it's a little testy. Still, the scene ends with no one getting hurt. Except, of course, for their feelings, I guess. In a third and also really funny scene, Buggin' Out gets in a confrontation with a white guy wearing, interestingly enough, a Larry Bird jersey, and for some reason drinking orange juice straight out of a carton. It was really weird. But he gets in a confrontation with him because he accidentally rode his bike over his Jordans and left an ugly black mark. So him and Buggin' Out are going back and forth about, hey, why are you in my community? He's like, I own this building. I was born in Brooklyn. Everyone goes when they hear that last bit. It's another moment where there's a potential for some intense racial confrontation, but like all the other scenes, it mostly ends in laughter. Like I said, all these scenes are pretty funny, and they mostly end lighthearted enough, but they still stand as moments of foreshadowing for the explosive racial climax that comes at the end of the film. And not all of these moments are good. There's a really uncomfortable conversation between Mookie and Pino regarding his outward racism towards black folks, and how certain black folks aren't black because they're successful, which is a really nasty thing to believe, in my opinion. And there's another conversation between Pino and Sal where they're talking about Pino's frustrations with working in an overwhelmingly black community. It's a really great scene, but it's also very intense and uncomfortable. Probably the most famous scene is a moment where, this sort of montage where we see various characters break the fourth wall. They look directly into the camera as it zooms in on them, and during each moment, these characters just hurl this vicious stream of racist profanity at the audience. You know, there's Italian profanity, there's anti-black profanity, there's anti-Semitic profanity, anti-Latino profanity. Each character kind of just gets their moment. It's really nasty, and it ends with Mr. Senior Love Daddy, again played by the wonderful Sam Jackson, just rolling up to the camera and looking in the audience and telling everyone needs to chill out. It's a pretty great scene. My only frustration with the scene is during the first shot where we see Mookie and we zoom in on Spike Lee, he's blinking too much. Like, it's a really brief shot, but he blinks like 10 times. It's really frustrating. I was like, stop blinking so much in your own movie, Spike. It's distracting. And this, of course, brings us to the big climax of the movie. And before I can talk about the climax, I got to talk about everything that leads up to it. In one of the earlier scenes in the film, we see Bugging Out going to eat lunch at Sal's Pizzeria. And just before he sits down to take a bite of his pizza, he looks up on the wall and sees there is a wall of fame on Sal's Pizzeria where he uses to display photographs of famous and successful Italian Americans, such as Frank Sinatra, who else? John Travolta. You get the idea. Lots and lots of Italian Americans. Well, Bugging Out takes exception to this. He says, yeah, sure, it's Sal's an Italian American, but he's running his business in a predominantly black neighborhood. His clientele is overwhelmingly black. His success is dependent on them, so black folks should have representation on his wall. Sal, of course, dismisses him, saying, hey, it's his place. He can do whatever he wants. He wants a wall of fame just for Italian Americans, and so be it. You know, when Bugging Out gets his own place, he can put whatever he wants on the wall. And initially, Mookie agrees with him. He's like, hey, Bugging Out's just, he's causing trouble. He needs to stop. And it gets really heated at one moment where Sal actually grabs a baseball bat, foreshadowing what happens during the climax, and approaches Bugging Out. Interestingly enough, it's Pino who steps in and takes the bat from him, diffusing the situation, which is pretty interesting given his outward hostility towards black folks. Bugging Out is eventually ejected from the restaurant and decides to stage a boycott against Sal's Pizzeria, and he tries to get as many people in the community involved as he can, but no luck. The young people don't want anything to do with his boycott. They like Sal. In fact, one of those young folks includes a very young Martin Lawrence in what I think is his first major motion picture appearance. Don't quote me on that, I might be wrong. But they don't want anything to do with him. The old folks don't want anything to do with him either. They don't have a problem with Sal, and quite frankly, they think he's just starting trouble anyway. However, Bugging Out does find a kindred spirit in Radio Raheem, who himself also had a confrontation with Sal earlier in the film regarding his frustrations with playing his loud music in his restaurant. He decides to join Bugging Out in his boycott, and so does a third person, Smiley, a mentally handicapped man who makes his living selling photographs of Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X on the street. The climax begins with what's supposed to be the end of the day at Sal's restaurant. They're getting ready to close. Sal counts all the money, and he tells everyone, hey, it's been a great day. We made a lot of business. I'm thinking about renaming the place to Sal and Sons. He showers Mookie with praise. Everything just seems so good. Like, everyone managed to get through this day without any trouble, and it's about to finally end. But then those young folks from earlier, they come knocking on the door. They want one more meal before the restaurant closes. And Sal, being in a good mood, obliges them. He lets them in for one last round of pizza. But not long after this, Bugging Out, Radio Raheem, and Smiley show up, and they engage in their boycott. Radio Raheem is blasting "Fight the Power" by Public Enemy, and they can barely hear each other over as one another as they're shouting at each other, bugging out, demanding that black folks be represented on his wall of fame. And things get hot. It gets hot real fast. One party starts using anti-Italian American slurs. Sal responds by using the N-word. It gets ugly, and the whole thing ends with Sal grabbing his baseball bat, the same one from earlier, and smashing Radio Raheem's ghetto blaster to smithereens. It's all in pieces. After a long, awkward silence, as everyone tries to sort of piece together what they just saw, Radio Raheem snaps. He grabs Sal, and a fight ensues, which eventually spills out into the street outside the restaurant and attracts the attention of everyone else in the community. Eventually, the police do show up to break up the fight, but they don't really succeed in de-escalating the problem. They pull Sal and Radio Raheem off each other, but in the process of doing so, one of the officers manages to strangle Radio Raheem. He strangles him to death, brutally and needlessly in front of all of his neighbors and all of his friends. After his body drops to the floor, they're not entirely convinced he's dead, and one of the officers kicks his corpse and screams at him. It's just a really horrible looking sight. And after they're finally convinced that, yeah, they killed him, they quickly throw his body into the back of the cruiser. They arrest Buggin' Out, and they quickly drive away, basically leaving Sal and his sons to face the wrath of the community who just saw what had happened to one of their own. And they get hot. They get angry at Sal fast. They're basically focusing their frustrations on him, almost sort of blaming him for the murder of Raheem that they just saw. They're just about ready to finish what Radio Raheem had started. And Mookie, who had up until this point had been defending Sal, he's had enough. And in the film's most iconic moment, he crosses the street from Sal's restaurant, grabs a trash can, empties it out, returns to the restaurant, and he hurls it through the window, basically signaling to the mob to start ransacking the restaurant, which they do. They rush into the restaurant, they tear the place up, they overthrow the furniture, they destroy all the decorations, they take money out the register, and eventually they light the place on fire. Quickly, the police return, and they bring the fire department with them in order to stop the riot and suppress the fire. They order the rioters to disperse, but they don't want to go. This is their neighborhood. They have a right to be here as far as they're concerned, but the police aren't having it. And during the course of this, the fire department takes their fire hoses and they turn it on the people in the neighborhood, an image that invokes an obvious history of racial animosity in America. While all of this is unfolding, we get a shot of Mookie and his sister just sitting on the sidewalk, completely flabbergasted at how badly things have unfolded between them. Right before the scene ends, we get a shot inside the restaurant, the smoldering restaurant. We see an image of Sal's bat on fire on the floor. We see an image of Radio Raheem's destroyed boombox, completely shattered and in flames, and across the ruined floor we see Smiley walk up to the wall, Sal's now ruined wall of fame, and he pins a picture of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. on the wall. And we get to see a shot of him smiling. At long last, they finally managed to get their picture on the wall. A victory that is rendered moot by the fact that the restaurant is now completely in ruins. The film's final moments take place on the following morning. Mookie wakes up, he gets chewed out by his girlfriend Tina. Like I said, Rosie Perez, she's really good at playing angry. And after that, he goes to Sal's restaurant. Sal is sitting outside of his smoldering, ruined restaurant. He's completely heartbroken, and Mookie demands his pay for the week. Sal is initially reluctant as far as he's concerned. Mookie is responsible for what happened to his restaurant, but Mookie reminds Sal that he has insurance. Insurance is going to pay for everything. It's going to compensate for all the damage. Insurance isn't going to bring back his dead friend Radio Raheem. Eventually, Sal relents, takes the money, and he throws it at Mookie and tells him to get out of his face. But things between them don't end entirely hostilely. Eventually, the whole thing ends with them having a brief, pithy discussion about the weather. Apparently today's going to be even hotter than it was yesterday, and Sal, he's going to go to the beach. That's how he's going to spend his day. He's going to go somewhere else and cool off. Mookie takes his money and he walks off. As Sam Jackson, playing Mr. Senior Love Daddy, asks his listeners and the audience, will we ever learn to live with each other? Just before the credits roll, we get two different quotes. The first one from Martin Luther King Jr. and the second one from Malcolm X, both of which offer conflicting views on violence and the role that violence plays as a tool of shaping societal change. Now that the film is over, this begs the question, did Mookie do the right thing? Well, on his commentary track, Spike Lee mentions that no black person has ever come up to him and asked him whether or not they thought Mookie did the right thing. As far as they're concerned, it's pretty obvious. It's mostly white folks who come up and beg the question. Often these white folks are much more distressed about the idea of Sal's restaurant being destroyed than they are about Radio Raheem losing his life, which kind of signifies some white folks' opinions on white people losing their property being worse than black folks losing their lives. Maybe that's not what they really think, but the fact that they kind of go to that first as being the most upsetting moment in the film, it's a little telling. I will say, however, I think Sal comes really close to making a point in the final scene of the film. Sure, insurance will pay for everything, but more is lost than just a restaurant here. A community is fractured, deeply fractured, perhaps beyond the point of repair. Not that everything was rosy before, there was definitely tension, but there was a sort of an equilibrium here. Sal had his restaurant, he had his business, he was making his money, and the community gets to have a pizzeria. They get a place to go to eat and have good food. And for a while, that was fine. Now both of those things are lost. What did they get in the end? Well, they lose a pizzeria and they lose one of their own. In the end, nothing is gained, no party really wins. I will say, however, you could easily argue that Mookie did do the right thing by saving Sal's life. You see, at that final climactic moment before the riot begins, everyone's getting ready to just tear Sal apart. They're just absolutely livid with him. And by taking the trash can and throwing it into the window, basically what Mookie has done is that he's encouraged the rioters, the angry mob as it were, to focus their frustrations on the property rather than the people, which affords Sal and his sons an opportunity to escape with their lives. So yeah, there's that. Do the Right Thing was a commercial success. It was a pretty good commercial success on its initial release, but things were a little testy with critics. Some film critics, such as Roger Ebert, who does have an essay published with the Criterion release, loved the film, but there was also some critics, such as, who were they? David Denby, Jack Kroll, Joe Klein, who had some very negative things to say about the film. Klein himself suggested that perhaps the film could be seen as an incitement to violence, that if somehow black folks were to see it, they would all leave the theaters and just go riot and start getting violent with white folks just because of what they saw, which is extremely ignorant. We all see violent films, we all see films that deal with difficult social issues, and to think that just because black folks see that they're just going to respond violently, that's just... It's really telling as to what he thinks about black folks and what he thinks that they're mentally capable of. It's kind of telling of his own racist beliefs, in my opinion anyway. Let's talk a little bit about the Criterion release itself. First off, it's only available on DVD. When they originally got the rights for this back in... what year was it? Was it 2001? Yeah, it says right here, 2001. There was no Blu-ray, so they can only get it for the DVD. There is a DVD version out there, but it's not Criterion. It's another company that came out with it. More on that later. But yeah, let's see what we got. We got audio commentary tracks with Spike Lee. There's Joey Lee. There's folks who worked in the production. Let's see what else we got here. We got a video introduction from Lee himself, There's a 60-minute documentary about the making of the film, which is pretty good. Let's see here. There's a segment where Spike Lee and his producer, they go and revisit the set of where they filmed, or actually it was there in the bed-stuy community. They kind of all just built things like the restaurant there. It was really interesting to watch them go back. There was a press conference at the '89 Cannes Film Festival where they initially debuted the film. Pretty good. The audio quality isn't best, but then again, it was recorded in '89, so not really. I'm not really expecting the best audio quality. I really liked the behind-the-scenes footage, though, that they included with this. So Spike Lee recorded a lot of stuff that he did for the pre-production side of the film. A lot of stuff like rehearsals and little on-the-cuff interviews he did with the actors about their feelings about making the film. That was probably my favorite supplement of this. I really like kind of seeing them kind of pull the curtain and having him talk to all those actors about the film and what they thought about the themes and what they thought about acting and everything. It was really, really nice. And there's like a little outro too for the release where Spike Lee goes off on I believe it was Joe Klein about his very unflattering review of the film and his very unflattering opinions on what he thinks about black film-going audiences. That was kind of nice to watch him tear him a new hole. And of course, there's a little booklet with an essay from Roger Ebert. That's very nice. Like I said, the only problem I have with this is that there's just no Blu-ray release. I think there was like a 20th edition Blu-ray release out there, which is kind of funny because we're rapidly approaching the 30th anniversary of the film. So that 20th edition, it's almost 10 years old. I haven't seen it. I'm sure the video quality and everything is fine. I think there's some features on there that's not included here. And of course, I think there's some features that are on here that aren't included on that release as well. So it's hard. So I mean, I guess you could say if you want the best picture quality and all, you want to get that release. But it's hard to beat the Criterion version. I will say mine's the older version with the underscore logo. They went and re-updated this with a more recent logo, but it's still the DVD version. Wouldn't it be nice for the 30th anniversary if they got the rights back so they could publish a DVD upgrade for this? This is one of the best films in the 80s, and I think one of the best American motion pictures ever made. It's a difficult watch. It's very challenging. It deals with some uncomfortable themes, but I like how Spike Lee doesn't like approach this in this pie-in-the-sky way where it's like, you know, oh, why can't we all just get along? And he tries to put forth easy answers to difficult questions. He's aware that these are very difficult problems, and these problems we're still dealing with today. And he doesn't try to make everything real simple and easy to understand. You know, we're all aware that this is a problem that requires many, many years of healing and many, many years of empathy and understanding, and thus for us to overcome. And I really like the fact that he doesn't try to muck it up with easy answers. He just shows a really ugly, difficult situation that feels very real. This came out just a few years before the LA riots and the whole thing with Rodney King, and so it was definitely sort of ahead of his time in that sense, and it's still relevant today, sadly, but I still think it's a spectacular film, and it must be viewed. And this is it's not a bad way to see it. Like I said, it's just a shame it's not on Blu-ray. And that just about does it for this review of Do the Right Thing, Spine number 97. It's an American classic. It's a great film. It's a difficult watch, but it's a fine film. In fact, it's kind of interesting that I use a number randomizer to decide which Spine number I'm going to get, and it's interesting it picked that one because Spike Lee has a new movie out, Black Klansman. I haven't seen it yet. I've heard good things about it. I heard it's a very entertaining film, so who knows? I might have to go back and check it out. But yeah, that just about does it for this review of Do the Right Thing. Let's go ahead and check with our number randomizer and see what our next film is going to be. Take it away, number randomizer. Spine my number 909, a recent one, and it's Night of the Living Dead. It's another classic. It's a different kind of classic, but it's still a great film. It's definitely also one of the newer releases. I don't have a lot of the newer releases. I don't have a lot of stuff in the 900 range, so it's very interesting that it landed on this one. We go all the way from 97 to 909. So, but yeah, Night of the Living Dead. This is one I've definitely seen a few times. I was a big zombie movie fan way back when I was in high school. So yeah, this should be great. So yeah, keep on an eye out for that. Next to my head are some other videos you might want to click on if you like this Criterion critique. So go ahead and enjoy those if you watched. If you want to watch some more, don't forget to leave a comment down in the comment section if you have any opinions on the films or any suggestions of stuff you might want to see. And that just about does it for this video. I'm going to go watch some movies. I'm going to go watch Night of the Living Dead. And I will see you in the next video.